All right, welcome everybody to the Doyle D'Angelo Show. I am your host, Doyle D'Angelo, on this fine Friday night, and I have a guest with me, Keller Brown. How's it going?
It's going great, man. Good Friday night, just watching basketball, ready to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was definitely a good night in basketball. We started off with the 76ers and the Knicks, and then we finished off with the T Wolves and the Spurs. Of course, the Spurs taking the game, and then the Knicks ending up blowing out the Sixers by the fourth quarter. But two pretty interesting games, just the way that they went. Me and Keller both have a good amount of notes here on both games. Um, we'll kind of start at the top with the first game with the 76ers and the Knicks. It's pretty interesting. Really seemed like Kelly Oubre, out of all players, was maybe the most important guy on the court in the first half for the Sixers. He kind of kept them in the game. He got some massive rebounds. He sort of paced the team in scoring along with PG, making the right cuts, hitting his open shots from deep, drawing charges. He was really everywhere and kind of filled the hole Maxi usually fills for this team. But, of course, once you kind of got to the second half, the Knicks sort of found a way to really clamp down on him. And there's definitely like a few things. I think one of the biggest trends in this game was the fact that the bench for the Sixers was outscored 25-0 early in the third. Um, they just not really deep enough to match the Knicks. Did you kind of get that same feel?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if my notes serve me correctly, Quentin Grimes was the first guy to really score off the bench for the Sixers when he hit two threes in the first couple minutes of the fourth quarter. And it's funny because, last year with the Knicks, they played their starting five, it seemed like more than any other team. That was kind of Tom Thibodeau style. And now that they have their new coach now, they're getting a lot more production out of their bench. Deuce McBride, excuse me, was thrust into that starting role because of OG Anunoby, not being able to play today. But I mean, Mitchell Robinson, they kind of implored the Hacker Robinson for a little bit there in that game, and he ended up hitting his free throws, so that was surprising. But the bench just really just took it to the 76ers in this one.
Yeah, yeah, they just really didn't have, a lot to go off of in this game. And you kind of pair the way that their bench played with the fact that they had a lot of turnovers in the second half. PG kind of comes off really hot, in the first quarter, and then after that he goes 0 for 9.
Not
So
good.
from one of your right, I mean, from one of your best players, that's just not really enough. Can't really get worse than that. And then, of course, Maxi actually had a pretty good game, but he was 8 for 12, had 17 points, 7 assists. But they're gonna need him to be more involved in the future and a little bit more aggressive going forward. Um, but the series is already over, right? I think the inconsistency from him has been kind of like a huge part of why they're down 3-0 and why they haven't been super competitive just, in a complete 48 up to this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. And, like you mentioned, Tyrese Maxey, shooting 8 of 12, 17 points. Like, you're not going to look at that game and say he had a bad game, but he didn't have the ball in his hands nearly as much as I would have liked if I were, a fan of the 76ers, because what I noticed a lot, at least in the first half, is they were getting a lot of buckets in transition. The 76ers were, and that's what kind of put the Knicks defense on their heels. Potentially got Carl Anthony Towns in some foul trouble, and obviously he really didn't play a ton in this game. So I just didn't understand why they, ran away from it. Credit to the Knicks if they, had some insane adjustment. Obviously, credit to them, but I just there's just definitely something missing with this Sixers team, and it's unfortunate because they're very talented. And part of me thinks, is it Embiid just there slowing down the offense? That's kind of a question that I would like to ask because obviously Embiid's very talented, but he is kind of stagnant when it comes to an offensive force. Yeah, he can, pass out to somebody on the 3 point line, which he did to Paul George, I believe, in the first quarter, which is obviously one of his only buckets. Um, but I don't know. The Embiid playing better with him, better without him. It's an interesting debate for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go, or there's a lot to talk about with Embiid, right? Because you have his play on the court, and then you have his injury issues, and then you're kind of putting the two together, and you're saying, okay, well, what's happening here? Is it the injuries that are kind of holding him back? Is it his style of play a little bit? Embiid is amazing, and that's actually one of the notes that I had here. Of course, he's amazing. He's one of the best players in the NBA, former MVP. But can the Sixers win with him? That's always been the question. He's still yet to get out of the second round. They're not going to get out this year, being down 3-0. And so you do have to ask yourself, like, this guy can't stay healthy for a full season. He can't stay healthy in the playoffs. Okay. That's a big detriment to your team when he's your best player. You have an aging superstar in Paul George who, sometimes can get really hot and then other times can just disappear like he did tonight. I mean, tonight was kind of a microcosm of that. Maxi is a really, really good number two, but he has been inconsistent, in the last couple games when they've needed him the most, whether it's not shooting the ball enough or shooting the ball really inefficiently. So, you know, I think it's a mix of Embiid. I think it's a mix of them needing to get a little bit younger. I mean, Andre Drummond's still on their bench. Like, I don't really know if they have the pieces in totality to get to where they want to go, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I do agree with that, and it is interesting, like you mentioned, Tyrese Maxey is a great player, has a potential to be an all-star caliber player. I do believe that. VJ Edgecombe, their rookie, he's obviously still a rookie, but he has shown flashes. He seems very athletic. In the first quarter of tonight's game, back-to-back plays, there were back-to-back alley-oops from Maxey to Edgecombe, and that got the Sixers crowd fired up. So that was really cool to see. But, kind of like him and Paul George, didn't really see a ton from them coming down the stretch. And Kelly Oubre, kind of how you led off the episode with, really was the team player. He hit a three to close out the half at the buzzer that, rattled around. He hit, I believe, another three in the game. And it's if Kelly Oubre is your leading scorer, like he's a good player, do not get me wrong, but he cannot be your leading scorer when you have Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey on your team and you're trying to, you know, stave off a 3-0 deficit. It just can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and we might as well get into the Knicks now.
Oh yeah.
I think the Sixers they have a lot to figure out, but the Knicks, obviously, they are vying for a championship, and I think that they are better positioned than they've ever been, honestly, to win a championship this year, just with the path that is required of them. Looking at the competition and just how this team is constructed and how Mike Brown has this team playing as a unit on both sides of the ball. I think that when you kind of look at this team under Tibbs, like very good team overall, strong defensive identity, very good offensive spurts. But I think if you had a calling card for this team, it was probably going to be their defense and Jalen Brunson, right? But now it seems to be Jalen Brunson and the crew. Cat is kind of taking on a different role. Like, what are you sort of seeing with this team that might be different from the previous year?
Well, what I'm seeing that is the same, to get that out of the way first, is Jalen Brunson is still incredible. He can get to his spot whenever. In the first half, he started off shooting not a great percentage. I believe he was 3 of 9 or 3 of 10 to start, and then it seemed like he just did not miss the rest of the game. So that is the one thing that hasn't changed. One thing that has changed is the ability to, rotate multiple pieces off of the bench. Normally, like I said, Miles McBride or Deuce McBride comes off the bench. Landry Shamet had double-digit points today. He was incredible. But in terms of the stars, like Josh Hart, him having 12 points on 6 of 12, like that's a perfect night for him because he doesn't need to, shine above the rest. Mikal Bridges, in some of my notes, he was incredible tonight. Like just catching and shooting multiple times off Brunson dishes, multiple
Mhm.
threes in the corner, and he was getting a lot of heat in the early part of the Hawks series for
As he should.
literally not scoring. So this is obviously a big step up for him, but I thought he played incredible, and the whole team defensively, they just seemed to lock in just as a unit. Going at Max. Maxi's obviously incredibly quick. He's fast. He's twitchy, so he's going to get his eventually. But just locking down on Embiid, making sure that he can't just bully you in the post. Cat, I thought played decently well. Obviously, he got in a lot of foul trouble. Barely didn't
Yeah.
reach 30 minutes. Only had 8 points. So doesn't look like a great game for him. But I thought he held his own a decent amount.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of a lot to unpack there with the Knicks. I mean, they could just come at you in so many different ways. And Cat, it's so funny. The narrative coming into this game was Cat needs to stop fouling, right? He can't guard Embiid, and he was having so much trouble. But it just didn't matter. Like you said, they got that big game from Bridges from 5 first round picks. Mikal Bridges, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we can ever get over that. I don't think he's
Mm-hmm.
ever gonna be worth that type of draft capital. I mean, most superstars aren't even worth that type of draft capital,
No.
but he is starting to come into his own the last 3 games. His numbers have jumped way up in efficiency, in total production. And so that's what you want to see because I think if Mikal Bridges and Cat play the way that they did, this team is going to be like maybe the hardest out besides OKC, because that's something that they were missing last year was just that extra offensive and consistent production outside of Brunson, especially with OG Anunoby also being out last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these side players, the players that really are important in every playoff series, are those type of guys. So
Oh,
kind of just looking here, just to kind of round out the conversation on Bridges, he was 8 for 14 for 23 points. Um, and then, really talking about, some of the other guys, talking about the type of performances that move a championship team closer to that ring. Shamit, he provided great minutes off the bench, scoring 15 points at an 83% clip. And you had Josh Hart, who's 6 for 12. He had 12 points and 11 rebounds, so a really good double double game for him. Um, but when you kind of look at the production across the board and you kind of see just all these different players just kind of chipping in, what does that say to you about this Knicks team?
honestly, looking at the production across the board for tonight's game specifically, all I'm thinking about is they can be so much better. They didn't have OG Anunoby tonight. Cat is still getting in foul trouble playing against Embiid. Obviously, there's a couple other big men potentially in other series that could give him trouble, but as of right now, he's still, you know, having a little bit of trouble. But Josh Hart went 0 of 4 from three tonight and still had 12 points. Mikal Bridges, is he going to have another great game like that? Maybe. Obviously, Knicks fans hope so. Brunson, we expect him to have 25, 30 points. So if they can just keep consistently getting, 20-ish points off their bench every single night, I don't see how this team isn't the overwhelming favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. I just really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one of the biggest stories coming out of tonight's game, right? Is that they didn't have OG Anunoby, and of course Shamit was getting more minutes, I think, because of it, and he was like their most efficient player, Not as much
Hmm.
volume, but it's like it's kind of, they're just kind of rich over there. They have so much depth, and I think that's the thing that the Sixers are missing, and it was really glaring tonight. Um, and then, of course, when your star's playing like Brunson is, I mean, it just makes the entire game and the flow of it much easier
Oh yeah.
for the entire roster. You know, Brunson's so good at getting in the lane, kind of getting a defender on his backside and kind of using angles to get really good shots, really
Oh
good
yeah.
positioning. He was doing that all night. And Now he has the most 30-point games in Knicks playoff history. Um, and he ultimately finished with 33,
Is
9 rebounds, and 5 assists.
isn't that insane? Because I believe this is his fourth season on the team, and he already has the most 30-point games in 30-point postseason games in franchise history. Like he has just
Yeah,
come in and just delivered year after year, game after game, postseason after postseason. I mean, it's
yeah.
it's incredible to watch. And at this point, I mean, are they going to close it out 4-0? I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Philly, just has one last ditch effort to get another game in this series. But I would be shocked if it went more than 5 games. Shocked.
I mean, with the way the Knicks have been playing, I think they close it out in four.
Yeah, I
They
wouldn't be surprised either. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, I mean, they have not been playing with their food at all. I mean, in the Hawks series, people were like, "Oh, what's going on?"
Hmm.
But ever since they started off like not the greatest, they've been dominant. Like they've been winning these games by like at least a margin of 10, sometimes 20, sometimes 25 plus, right?
Sometimes 30.
This team is sometimes 30. So this team has really hit their stride, and they're not playing around. You can really see it. And kind of just to round out that point, the stat that we have here is that at least coming into this game, so this point differential has grown, of course, because they ended up winning the game by 14 points. They were 238 plus point differential in the fourth quarter going into this game.
That's
That,
wild.
yeah, that's crazy. Third best in the last 70 years. You know how many
That's
great teams and
yeah.
great dynasties we've had,
That's
and this
wild.
is the team that's doing
That's
it?
they're beating the crap out of teams.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's wild to see. And yeah, to your point, like there have been so many great dynastic teams over the last, multiple decades, and the fact that this team is doing it, I mean, they are built to win. They're absolutely built to win.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think the Sixers have kind of just run into a buzzsaw, a team that's really working at their best. What do you think about, Mike Brown's touch on this team?
I it's interesting because excuse me, he has had coaching stints in the past where it's worked out for a little bit and hasn't worked out. You look at his time most recently with the Sacramento Kings, he got fired there. Is that a good decision? Whatever, we can leave that in the past. But I think he's left a good mark on this team just by kind of enforcing the team aspect. Obviously, Brunson is an isolation player; he's going to get his, but just the movements and everything that I'm seeing with them and Landry Shamet specifically tonight coming off the bench, just instilling confidence in these guys because with Tom Thibodeau, it seemed like he just wanted to play his starters and that's it. He didn't express confidence in the
Yeah.
bench guys, in the 6 through 10 guys on the bench. And it might seem cheesy or simple to say, but just giving your guys minutes and letting them hook up shots even if they don't go in, I think that's huge. So I think something as small as that, a difference as small as that, has paid major dividends for this Knicks team.
Yeah, like actually using the full depth of the roster in a way that actually benefits everyone. Because as we've seen, like the playoffs are grueling, okay?
Oh yeah.
Like getting to a championship and winning a championship, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, it doesn't matter. It's not only a game of skill and strategy, but it's also a game of endurance. And you have to have players who can last. But part of that is team management. And so maybe that's the one downside to having Tibbs as a coach is that he may not manage a roster as loosely as like another coach would. He just doesn't trust as many players. And I part of me feels like, well, maybe because you're not coaching these guys up the right way. Because when I look at Mike Brown, for example, he's not only getting more out of his bench, but he's also getting more out of his star players. Like, I think the
Hmm.
biggest question for the Knicks was, can Cat actually be a guy you can win a championship with? And once again, we still need to see if that's the case. But the way that Cat is playing, he's not just on the perimeter. He's getting in the paint. He's being a distributor. He's in the pick and roll. Like they're using him in different ways, in honestly in better ways for his skill set. And sometimes he takes over games. Like that's what we need more of.
Hmm.
And then the bench players. I feel like everyone coming off the bench is they're just a little bit more efficient and they're playing a little bit better as a team on offense. So I think that's Mike Brown. Once again, this guy is two-time coach of the year. I think that he's been very, very good coach for a long time in this league, and he kind of catches some flack. But I think a lot of the best coaches catch a lot of flack anyway. But I do think that Mike Brown ultimately deserves like a lot of credit for how this team is playing right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He deserves all the credit, and even though for the most part it's the same roster as last year, he definitely deserves a lot of credit because one voice can definitely switch the entire mindset, culture, vibe of a team up, and I think you're seeing it right now with this Knicks team.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we can look forward to the Knicks probably playing the Pistons. I don't really trust in the Cavs to come back. We'll see. It could turn into a good series, but yeah, I think the Knicks and the Pistons are destined for a date, and that should be a fun one. So,
I agree.
um, yeah. So, all right, we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk T Wolves and Spurs. All right, welcome back, guys, from the break. Now we're going to talk about the Spurs and the T Wolves. Man, has this series been physical, competitive, and just a back and forth affair. There's a lot to unpack with this game, I would say, but you know, really, we can start with Edwards. Of course, Edwards, he had 32 points, 14 rebounds on two bum knees, which is very important to talk about, and then 6 assists. So I feel like he came to play. He hit some big shots. He was getting in the lane, getting other guys in rhythm, but ultimately, he couldn't really hold up what was a team that really didn't shoot the ball well tonight. It was really hard for the Wolves to kind of get into a rhythm. Did you kind of see the same thing?
Yeah, I did see the same thing, and is part of it because of the injuries? Probably. I mean, you look at their starting point guard tonight, Mike Conley, was basically just a placeholder. He played 4 minutes, which was an interesting kind of decision. But I understand it
Yeah.
because you have Terrence Shannon, who's the more athletic, point guard, who he had a couple of explosive runs at the rim. I remember one where he almost threw it down on uh, the Spurs center, not Wemby, but excuse me, on Luke Cornett, and he's awesome to watch. But yeah, they just didn't really get a ton going offensively. It was kind of all Anthony Edwards, and then Julius Randle struggled big time in this game when it comes to getting his own shot. I mean, when he had the ball in his hands, he was able to kind of direct the Wolves' offense in a way. But then when he decided to get his own shot, especially in the first 3 quarters, it was not a pretty sight. And then Gobert is obviously not going to create his own shot, so you're already a little limited there. But it was tough to see from the Wolves' perspective offensively, and Jaden McDaniels also a very, very poor shooting day as well, even though he's trying his best on the defensive end. And it was, in my opinion, this is just a Wolves team that is absolutely trying their hardest, and they just couldn't get it done against, in all reality, is just a better team in the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, a better team, but the Wolves definitely have a lot of potential to win these games. I mean, it's not
Absolutely.
like they're being I mean, they got mollywopped last game, but sometimes those anomaly games happen.
Mhm.
But you're right. Like, Randall was one of eight entering the fourth quarter, and he's supposed to be technically their second option. Like, that just can't happen.
No.
Um, but we've seen this before. Like Randall, when he was with the Knicks, and now with the Wolves, like he's kind of one of those players where he can have these like great games here and there, but he's just, for me, like he just holds a team up more than he brings a team up. And I don't think you can really win a championship with him. I don't know if you can win many important like playoff games with him.
Ah,
He's just he's too inconsistent.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
uh,
I tend to agree with that, which is tough because him at his absolute best is you could argue he's the second best player on a team, but a championship team, that's just a little bit of a stretch. And he's a good player, don't get me wrong, but I tend to agree with, your assessment of, holding a team back versus lifting it up.
yeah, I mean, you could just see tonight, there were a lot of plays where he just, he'd lose a defender. He's not really good on defense tonight. It just seemed like he wasn't really making the right plays on the floor. You could tell he was frustrated that he wasn't making enough shots, right? And so
Oh yeah.
those things catch up to a team really quickly. You have to keep your head in the game. And his body language and everything just doesn't really match someone or a running mate of Anthony Edwards, who has like the best body language and the best energy and the best play on the court, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think
Absolutely.
he's the right running mate or the right number two for Edwards, and I think a lot of people who watch basketball a lot probably see that. But we'll kind of move on from Randall. You know, 3 for 12 for 12 points and a -11. McDaniels was no better. McDaniels is honestly worse. He was 5 of 22 from the field, and everyone else on the team was pretty inefficient. So if you're sort of looking at like, okay, why did this team lose? Well, the team just didn't really have a rhythm. Besides Reed, Reed was good. I think he was pretty huge, hitting a couple big threes. Also feeding the ball to his teammates, getting in the lane. He was expertly crafty today and pretty impressive, I would say. He finished with 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. So, do you kind of see the same thing? Like Reed was kind of like the one guy who was like
Yeah.
consistent, semi-consistent.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, shooting splits are pretty good. 4 of 8 from downtown is pretty good as well. And I mean, with all this kind of, I guess, dogging, I guess you could say, that we're doing on the Timberwolves for having no rhythm, like they are still so talented that they were in this game in the last couple minutes, and he
Yeah.
had this three in the corner that just rattled in and out that would have brought him within three, and that would have only added to his performance. So I thought, was the best player on the court tonight besides Anthony Edwards for the Timberwolves, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because Edwards is clearly not 100%, clearly, but he's seems a little bit healthier than he was in the first two games in San Antonio, which is definitely interesting. But I just don't know if he can really be out there defensively against some of these young guns for the Spurs, which we can obviously talk about in a second. But it's a tough scene for the Wolves because they're just so talented and they play so hard, and I think they might just run out of gas potentially here.
Yeah, I mean, I really wrote like some really deep notes about just how the first half went because I think it was kind of a microcosm of what the Wolves are capable of doing, but also the problems that the Spurs pose, when they are working at their best. And you kind of get a sense that like outside shooting, I'd say 3-point shooting kind of becomes like maybe the biggest tipping point for teams that are facing the Spurs because as you could see in that first quarter, like the Wolves were trying to get into the lane. They were trying to get to the paint. But they were like tentative. They were second guessing themselves. They were timid. They were scared of Wemby, honestly,
Hmm.
and they just didn't feel comfortable enough to get shots up, even in the mid range sometimes. And I think when that's happening, you're basically your only saving grace is outside shooting. And the Wolves can hit the three, but they're not like amazing at it. And so I think when the Spurs are at their best, this is a really bad matchup for the Wolves in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it doesn't help that Dante DiVincenzo tore his Achilles, and he's one of their more elite three-point shooters as well. So that obviously doesn't help either. But yeah, that first quarter specifically, where the Wolves got down to an 11-1 deficit, and obviously they came back and they fought back and ended up tying it up at halftime. But still, I mean, that is just kind of a microcosm, as you said, of what teams are what their mentality is against Wemby, because you just have to be an elite jump shooting team, whether it be long twos or three pointers, and they just didn't have enough today. The Timberwolves didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting rhythm, right? Like they started 0 of 12, and they were down like 14-1 early in the first quarter. But then after trailing 15, Wemby goes on the bench, and then they go on an 11-2 run with four straight threes. Or no, not four straight threes, four straight buckets in the paint. So like Wemby goes out, paint, 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 right? Just immediately and constantly. And you could clearly see the difference between Wemby on the court. You could see the difference between, him off the court. I think Edwards hit like back to back threes in that sequence. And then, him kind of bringing that fire kind of allowed the Timberwolves to kind of come back in this game. And, even like Rudy Gobert, I think in the first half was like pretty integral. I think he hit like his first four shots and just really consistent, a very sure defender. I think he ended the game like 6 of 7. So, of course, Nas hitting some big shots. So they did what they needed to do in the first half. They weathered the storm, but I kind of had a feeling in this game the whole time that like even though the Wolves are hanging in here, it's just when you watch what Wimby does, it's just kind of tough to think that another team has an answer. Even with how well Rudy Gobert is playing, like I think we should give him a shout out. Like Rudy Gobert has been playing phenomenally against Wembenyama, but it's just barbecue chicken against the other
Yeah,
guys.
just can't do anything about it. And I mean, I guess we could just get right into how Wemby looked. I mean, 39 points, 13 of 18, 15 rebounds, 5 blocks. One of the most efficient games like that I've ever seen. At least just watching it without thinking about numbers. And then when you look at the numbers, you're like, okay, yeah, he actually cooked everybody that was defending him, and hit a couple of threes as well late in the second half. And I just don't really know what else to say about him. He just is incredible. And the fact that the Spurs have surrounded him with so much playmaking and so much shooting is incredible. Devin Vassell can hit any shot from outside, even though he was 1 of 6 today. But we have seen him shoot very well in the past. De'Aaron Fox, incredibly quick. That was some of my notes that I took down, that he was lightning fast coming up the court. Even after a made bucket, there was in the second half, Wolves made a bucket. He sprints down the court, gets an and one. I think the camera it wasn't even able to cut to it. That's how quick it was. So they they've surrounded him with a lot of really good talent, and this team is just dang good, man.
Yeah. Wemby was just amazing, right? It's not the fact that he looks like one of the monsters from Space Jams, but like he has like a full skill set, like a full toolkit on the basketball court at 7'4". He's hitting these turnaround jumpers. He's hitting shots from way downtown. He's sizing guys up, fading away. And then of course he's dunking on people, getting tip ins, like blocking guys from a few feet from the basket. Like it's a lot to deal with, and my mind immediately goes to like this is just the modern Wilt. Like this has to be
Yeah.
what watching Wilt was like,
Hmm.
because he's just so much taller and so much more skilled than everybody else. These type of players only come around every once in a few generations, not just once in a generation, like once in a few. And of course, tonight he becomes the fourth player all time with 35, 15, and 5. Of course, the other three are Olajuwon, Shaq, and Kareem. So it's pretty good company.
I was gonna say, great company, and it definitely is comparable to Wilt. And my mind also just goes to this is just like a much taller and potentially even more lanky Kevin Durant. I mean, he's hitting turnaround fadeaway jumpers, like you said. He's hitting threes, dotting people up from any point on the court, and it's awesome to watch. I mean, like as a fan of another team, it'd probably suck if you're a fan of the Timberwolves. It'd probably suck to watch this guy. Just you just can't do anything about it. But it is truly just insane to watch this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredible. Like we could talk about him all day, but I think he's obviously the X factor in every series, and I think the Wolves are weirdly positioned to play him well. I think that something that Chris Finch probably doesn't do enough of is giving Gobert enough minutes, honestly. Like I think in this type of series, you need Gobert on the court when Wemby's on the court. And
Mm.
there's just so much time in this game where he was in the game and Gobert wasn't. Like, did you find that kind of odd?
Yeah, and I just I wasn't necessarily looking out for that, but now that you point that out, it is a little interesting. And I mean, I guess maybe he's entrusting in Naz Reid to be that second guy, but Naz Reid isn't like he's a good offensive player, but he's not the shot blocker that Rudy Gobert is. I mean, we all know that. So that is a little interesting, actually, that Chris Finch decided not to do that. But I'm sure he has his ways. But he also only played 8 players tonight, so he's
Yeah.
not as deep as the San Antonio Spurs are, for example. But that is whatever you do against Wemby, he's probably going to outsmart you anyway.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, when you kind of talk about the Spurs being as deep as they are, they didn't even really have that good of a game as a team again. Like I think De'Aaron Fox made some timely buckets from outside. He was pretty effective in the pick and roll, but he
Hmm.
wasn't like super efficient from the field. I think he was like 7 of 19. Um, Vassell was efficient and made, timely plays all over the court, but he wasn't like, wowing you with his production. And besides like Vassell and Fox, though, the rest of the team is pretty inefficient. So,
Hmm.
but when you get 39 from your best player like that, like that's
You don't need it.
obviously yeah, right. Like you don't need much of it. It's a good recipe to win games. So, um, I'm curious, what did you think about the end of the game? Just like how it was managed and what was happening with the Timberwolves when they were trying to get some offense generated.
I mean, it seemed like they were just trying to get the next best shot. They were just trying to get only 3 pointers, and they were just wasting time, wasting time, wasting time. You could obviously always try and get a quick two to, you know, prolong the game. Anthony Edwards ends up hitting that three in the corner. But they seem like they don't have as much direction, especially when Anthony Edwards is as hobbled as he is. So I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting, but I mean, he did his best offensively, shooting just under 50%, having 30 points. You can't really ask for much more from him, to be honest with you. So it's interesting, and unfortunately they're just a little too injury riddled, I think, to truly compete at the level that they want to against the Spurs team.
Yeah, so you think the loss of DiVincenzo is kind of like
I
the big
think
loss?
so, and some people may not think losing a player like him is as big of a loss, but that's just another rotational piece that you can have that can stretch the floor, that can bring potentially if he's switched on to Wemby, he can bring him out, and then he could dish inside to Randall, Naz Reid, Gobert to just get a bucket inside, and it just allows for more options that they just don't have anymore. So that's just a loss that I think they're going to feel pretty heavily throughout the rest of the series. And I mean, Chris Finch, he's a good coach. He's led them to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and they've been in the playoffs multiple times with him. So I think he's going to do their best. He's going to do his best. I like what he does as a coach, but It's not looking great right now, especially when you're having to start Mike Conley at point guard.
Yeah, old man Conley. That's a tough draw, and
Oh yeah.
that's why I think that this team they need to make some moves. They need to get some players who can generate a little bit more offense because I mean, DiVincenzo, he's important for sure, but even then, like having DiVincenzo in this series, I don't think would change the outcome. I think Edwards deserves another number two,
Mm,
that is above Randall, as we've talked about before. So,
yeah.
um, you know, I think, yeah, I agree with you, but I still don't think it would kind of move the needle. I'm curious to kind of hear, do you think that they were forcing three pointers tonight, or do you think that the Spurs defense was so imposing that they just couldn't generate a lot of offense in the last couple minutes?
See, that's an interesting question because when you go up against a guy like Wemby, you have to have that need of hitting a lot of jump shots, whether that be two pointers or three pointers. And when they shoot 35%, the Wolves do from three, no matter how many you take, that's not going to get it done. And they went 14 of 40. So, and if you look at the Spurs,
Yeah.
just for example, they went 12 of 33. So they shot around the same percentage, but they didn't need to take as many because they have such a dominant paint presence. So, to answer your question, I think yes, they probably were forcing a lot of threes, but I think that's kind of how maybe that's how they think that they have to win, in order to, beat this Spurs team that just, when you go in there and try to challenge Wemby, you saw what happened, at the beginning of the series. He had 12 blocks. So, I mean, which is insane. So I think they're maybe a little scarred from that. They're a little scared to do it again, which I totally understand. But I think in this case, it's okay to put up a lot of threes. Forcing them, obviously, that's not a great look, but I think you just kind of have to live with what you can.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, based off of what I saw is, I think that the Wolves just were being crushed on offense. Like the Spurs had so many answers for everyone
Hmm.
on that team. Obviously, they were doubling Edwards, and then they just couldn't really get a lot of ball movement going in the last couple minutes. It was like the Spurs were trapping at the right times. They were taking the right angles. Maybe the Wolves, like maybe they ran out of gas, but it just seemed like they couldn't really get a lot of movement. It was hard for Edwards and the rest of the handlers to get into the paint and into the lane. So,
Hmm.
and of course, we know the Spurs are a great defensive team. Even outside of Wemby, something that is not talked about enough is that this team is full of like pretty good defenders. They score pretty well also. So just the identity of the Spurs definitely shines through late in games because you see that their depth and the way that they play as a unit really does kind of take over the game and it allows them to pull away. Same thing that you saw with the Knicks, right? The way
Hmm.
that they play together, their ability to play on both ends of the floor, they don't have a lot of like they do ISO, but it's like you have Jalen Brunson, of course, but like the
You're
way
gonna
that
do
they
that,
play and the
yeah.
way that they're constructed, they run away from teams. Same thing with OKC, right? LA's pretty competitive. Fourth quarter, pull away. You know,
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
happens.
It is what happens, and they're built to win, just like the Knicks are built to win. The Spurs are built to win, even though, a lot of people consider them a young, inexperienced team. They're showing that, it doesn't matter. They took care of the Blazers in round one, 4-1, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was 4-1 in this series too.
Yeah, honestly, I can see that too. So we'll see. This next game is probably the most important game of the series.
Absolutely.
Um, I, I mean, I'm probably going to take the Spurs, but I think the Wolves are going to give it their best shot. I think a very important thing to bring up here is the fact that Anthony Edwards, I think he played 40 minutes in this game,
Hmm.
on two bad knees. So is he going to be able to play the full game? I mean, he looked pretty good, honestly. I think that was one of my notes is that he played through a lot of contact tonight. He had like a twitch, he had his range of motion.
Hmm.
So he seems to be healing pretty well, but you just never know. Like in a playoff basketball game, like things can happen really quickly. So hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully we're good. We get a full Anthony Edwards experience in the next game. But hopefully they didn't use their calling caller card too early, and
Yeah,
stretch it a little bit too early.
that's a good point. That is a good point. And he played 40 minutes and he got 32 points, so you can't really ask for that much more from him. Obviously, he is Anthony Edwards. He could get 40 if he really wanted to, I'm sure. I'm sure nobody doubts that, but he's just going to have everybody else step up. So that is a good point. Jaden McDaniels and Ant both played 40, the only guys to play above 40. And, is that going to affect him? We'll see. But I would probably lean Spurs as well in the next game.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll see. This second round might be a little bit less competitive, like going forward. But I think obviously the conference finals on both sides are going to be really good. So we'll see how things shake out. Hopefully, we get some more competitive games going into the future. But it was awesome talking to you, Keller.
Yes,
It's great
sir.
having you on the pod, and I'm sure you'll be back in the future.
Yeah, I hope so, man. It was great talking to you.
All right, for sure. This has been the Doyle D'Angelo Show. We'll see you next time.